Okay, so good morning. Welcome to another ADOSKC meetup. We are here on Zoom today. And if you are in the chat, thank you so much for joining us on your Saturday morning. Good morning, Miss Avonia, Brian, Layton, and Cordell. If you are watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for tuning in. Please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and also we are on a mission to spread the word about ADOS, the importance of the movement, and how we are growing in Kansas City. So please share this video with your family and friends as well, and let's get started. Today, we are continuing our discussion from last week. We were in the midst of detailing our thoughts on reparations, and we kind of got caught up in the midst of a little back and forth debate about what what the Black middle class is all about. So we'll start there today. We are talking about what is Black middle class, is there a Black middle class, and the differences between wealth in Black and white communities. Later on, we'll also get into some current headlines that relate to ADOS life in Kansas City. So let's get started. As I said, with us, we have me, Kiera. Hello. We also have Miss Salvonia, Brian, Layton, and Cordell. So let's start. I'm trying to think where we should start. What question we should answer first as far as middle class. I think we should start there. Like, what is middle class in general? And this is if anyone has any articles that they'll want to link to, please put those in the chat as well so we can reference them. But what is middle class? And I found an article. I'll see if I can share my screen here.
So I don't know what the most recent statistics are on middle class. I think the last time I checked when I was doing studies, I think it was a median household income of about $175,000 a year, which would be considered middle class in the United States. I don't know. Somebody can fact check me on that. I'm at soccer, so I can't Google it right now. But
175,000 a year. Okay.
I think that's my guesstimation of what I guess what the definition of middle
Oh,
class would
okay.
be. But
Got it.
yeah.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Okay, hold on. Let's see if I can bring this up.
Kara, can you enable the sharing? Can you enable?
Oh, yes. Just a moment. Yes. Okay. Let me know if you can now.
Yeah, I think I'm good now. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see it. Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'll make it real quick. The way I understand it, I think we should consider, or we should categorize middle class by worth, by wealth as opposed to income, because we understand that even if, like Cordell was speaking to earlier, even if you have $175,000 worth of income, if you have $160,000 worth of bills, you're not going nowhere. I personally can't consider that middle class. I like this graphic that was created by Tom, because it gives you like markers. Like if we look at the good area, you know, $500,000 in net worth or more, whoever sits at this wealth level, they're able to, you know, attend a university, you know, around the prestige of like a University of Georgia, which is I think is a good marker. You know what I'm saying? Pay off all your student loans, you can save for retirement. I think this is a good marker of what elite. I would consider that good category as probably lower middle class and the elite as upper middle class. And then kind of, you know, ultra elite is when we're getting into, you know, the upper class and the high class of America. Because I think it's when we start to categorize it for income, like I said, that doesn't, you can't pass that down. So you could be making all of that money, but essentially, if you can't pass anything down to your children, like I can't consider anybody in the middle class. Or it's hard for me to consider you middle class if you don't have anything to give your children. That's kind of hard for me to see, but you know, maybe you guys see it a little different.
No, I agree with you 100%. So when she asked the question about what is considered middle class, I was just using the standard baseline of what I would consider. But anytime you read these statistics, you always have to consider that ADOS are in a different category, right? First and foremost, and then second, we always go off net worth, right? Because net worth is actual wealth, and I think you hit the nail right on the head.
I'm going to jump in and say that I agree, at least for Black Americans, that it's important to distinguish between income just being the basis of you considering yourself middle class, because white Americans statistically have 10 times more wealth on top of their income than Black Americans do. However, I also was going along with the guidelines, just basic guidelines here. You should be able to see an article from US News. Let me know if you can see it.
I can see it.
Okay, great. So here it kind of gives a chart of what is considered lowest income, lower middle income, upper middle income, and highest incomes. And I think we also need to go by that, because a lot of Americans, and especially Black Americans, have a misunderstanding of what is middle class based on what Leighton said. They said, you know, you're looking at what the material object possessions that you have. Like you might have a house, you might have a car, you might have a job that you afforded from graduating from college. However, we also have to include in that statistics. Sorry, that's my cat. And within this, Black Americans typically make between $35,000 to $45,000 a year. And if you look at this chart, that would place us, the majority of us, in the lowest or lower middle income bracket. Let me stop sharing my screen. Stop sharing. Yes. Okay. So that's kind of where we were, where we had to leave off last week. I think there definitely needs to be. Yeah. Okay. Let me see one more thing. I think there definitely needs to be an education on the wealth gap, and that being why Black Americans should not consider themselves middle class despite what income they make. All right, Miss Al, go ahead and jump in.
Hello, yeah, I was looking for this article, and I want to differentiate that before crack and after crack. And that needs to be, that is something, that's a variable that cannot be overlooked. And I was searching for an older article. This is before crack, and it's about the causes of inner city poverty, a hypothesis in search of reality. But this is the abstract. And what it says, it refers to over the past 40 years, poverty among the inhabitants of US inner cities has remained stubbornly resistant to public policy prescriptions, especially for African Americans and Latinos. The gap between their economic well-being and that of the mainstream has widened despite persistent repeated efforts to address the problem. At the same time, a certain stream of research has sought to explain urban poverty and the wide variety of explanations put forward as the basis for policy. This paper reviews the research, organizing it according to 8 major explanations or hypotheses: structural shifts in the economy, inadequate human capital, racial and gender discrimination, adverse cultural and behavioral factors, racial and income segregation, impacts of migration, lack of indigenous growth, and adverse consequences of public policy. We conclude that all the explanations may be relevant to urban poverty, but their significance and the degree to which they will support vary substantially. Our view, again, we have to look at, for me and Black wealth, you have to look at what took place in the 90s. You know, we talk about mass incarceration, but you have to realize the atomic bomb and what crack did to our communities as well, and how it affected wealth in the middle class community. It wasn't just the urban areas. That is what started the erosion of the Black middle class.
I think you make some good points there, and if you look at that same time frame that you're looking at, I think it actually addresses the Black family as a whole, right? The Black family as a whole, and the Black man, and the attack on the Black man, right? And then the attack on the rest of the Black family. And then this is where we're at today in 2020. This is what we're left with.
I also want to point out, Al, in addition to what you were saying, and I know it's something I like to research this because it's kind of entertaining to me. I think it was Reagan. I think Reagan that came on national television and it admitted that they purchased drugs for guns during the crack epidemic, and they pushed that into our societies. And I think it's very, very important that we hold our government accountable for that degradation and the introduction of crack cocaine into our neighborhoods, because they have said this on national news media, and I think it's important that we spread that message as well.
I think it's also important that we realize, I couldn't understand why California, but after what ADOS California did in their reparations bill, you have to realize the 4th, 5th largest market in the world. Crack was an atomic bomb in the Black community. It was an atomic bomb. So that's all. So we must have that discussion if we're gonna talk about Black wealth and the middle class. And of course, policy, Reagan policy, then we can take it back to Bill Clinton. A lot of jobs left, the manufacturing industry. You know, we had a lot of millionaire Black people that worked in these car plants, and that cannot be overlooked. You know, you had a lot of people that worked in these plants and made a huge amount of money, just to name one industry.
Agreed there. Guys, I put a to go in addition with Kiara's chat. I found one of the charts I got from, I don't know if I got it from Tone or if I got it from Yvette, but it shows the breakdown of the percentages of the levels that Black people get income. And I think we're trying to put that side by side with the article so we can get an idea of what the percentages of Black income across Black America. And that way we can get a clearer picture on where we sit as a collective.
I have additional articles that actually go into details about what Black income typically is, but I am not as tech savvy as I'd like to be, so I don't know how to do what you just said to do. Like, I tried to do it, but I couldn't. But I do have additional articles to reference. So
okay, can you see? If you can send me the link to the article, I think I can put it up.
Okay, I'm actually gonna put it in the chat.
Okay.
Give me a moment. Okay, hold on. Okay, there you go. All right. In the meantime, let me switch back and see a whole bunch of windows up. So there's this chart. Let me go back and share my screen. Okay. Okay. So there's this chart on Black demographics about how Black incomes have done since 1967. And as you can see, the average or the median household income for Black, excuse me, for Black Americans in 1967 was over $28,000 a year. Then you can see how it progressed through Nixon, Carter, Reagan, Clinton, Bush, Obama, and here in 2018, it was up to 41,000. And this also, if you look above it, you see what the average was for the rest of America, and it's consistently been at least $20,000 more throughout the course of, I think, about 50 years of going back 50 years. So before the first chart with USA News, you saw the incomes for the lowest and the lower categories. And here, looking at what Black Americans have made consistently, you can see that we've always been in the lower class. The majority of Black Americans have always been in the lower class. All right, go ahead, Layton.
Okay, I was gonna say two things I want to mention along with what you're saying. Look, based on that chart, and I'll pull this up first. Based on that chart, I did a little quick math. So the difference between, if you look at the white incomes and you look at Black incomes in 1968, and you remove the difference is 18,575. And then if you look at currently, what the difference is $21,815 between all of America and what Black people see. So in actuality, despite the fact that we make more money now than we did in 68, the gap between regular America and Black America has increased. And I also think it's important that we also have to understand this doesn't take into account inflation. So in addition to the gap widening, the money isn't as much as it was 40, 50, 60 years ago. And real quickly, I'll just share the screen, share my second screen, so like you guys can see the difference. So this is that chart I was telling you that I got from Tone, which breaks down Black household income by percentile. And if you look, the majority of, and so this chart was from 2010 to 2012, but right after 2012, we have the institution, something called a gig economy, which is all your delivery, Uber service jobs and all that type of stuff. and they include that now as full-time employment when they do the statistics. So these numbers are actually lower than what is being perceived currently today. Because I know some people say, "Oh, that chart is 8 years old." Well, the numbers are lower because they include the gig economy as full-time employment. So if you see the biggest percentile, we have 38% of all Black America, which is the biggest bulk, making between $12,500 and about $38,000. So if you compare that to where we sit on that income group, that sits us in the lower middle, somewhere between the lower middle and the lowest. That's our biggest group of people, and I'm willing to bet the majority of those people of that 38% of Black people in that percentile, I'm willing to bet they make closer to the 12.5 than they do the 38. But that hasn't been quantified. But I did just want to give a good comparison of exactly where we are in comparison to the class groups given in the article posted.
And that's good work, Leighton. This chart is where the money's at right here. This is real ADOS stuff right here.
And also, and I forgot to mention this, so we know right now Black people are 13-14% of the population. I think it's 42 million Black homes in America, but I think it's important that going along with that article that Al just pulled up, or the other article that shows the difference in incomes, we have to understand that between about 75 and 85, that's when you see a major influx of Black immigrants. So those numbers will be a tad askew because a big portion of that income is going to the 10 million Black immigrants that they don't suffer in the same ways we do. So those numbers may be slightly inflated because I think the numbers are there's 42 million Black homes and 10 million of that 42 million are ADOS. And so with that being such a significant number, I think we have to keep that in the back of our minds that despite what we see on the charts, those charts don't differentiate between Black immigrants and ADOS peoples. And we understand that Black immigrants' wealth values are way higher than ours. In some cases, they're actually higher than some of white America, depending on if we're discussing Nigerians against Canadians or Kenyans, et cetera, et cetera. Those wealth values do fluctuate, and they do kind of offset the data just a bit. If everybody saw the chart, I can stop sharing. I just wanted to give us an idea of what's what.
Okay. So I think something that you touched on that we might want to get onto is the effects of an inflation and the other effects of how our income does not determine us or isn't a determinant factor in our wealth, because as you know, there are many contributing factors within the system of structural oppression that even the those Black Americans who do make higher incomes still aren't. I mean, they may have the higher incomes on paper, but in reality, they're saddled with larger amounts of debt after graduating from college. If they're homeowners, they didn't have the network of family and friends who may contribute to their initial down payment, so their mortgages are higher. So even though they may have a middle class income, it doesn't matter because that money's been it's not the same as what a white person's middle class would be income, what are how far they can make their middle class income go. And oh, yep, go ahead, jump in, Miss Al.
Thanks, lady. But I was always taught you're only worth what you have in the bank. And until your home is paid off, it's a liability. So, excuse me. Um, so that's all. That was my only comment. So of course, salary, it doesn't matter, like you said. And during my time, when I went to school, I studied at St. Louis U from 1996 to 2000, computer science. And back then it was $100,000 worth of debt. You're only worth what you have saved. And again, I'm trying to find the article about a man that worked here in St. Louis. He worked as I think a parking lot attendant at a bank. And he would take investment advice from the executives as he, parked their cars or whatever. But he ended up a millionaire, just taking banking advice, saving the money on a meager salary. That's the only point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Okay, so I have um, two parts of two articles that I'm about to share now. Let me go into my desktop. Share again. Okay, so we'll start here. And if you can see the screen, please let me know. Someone holler out, can you see it? Or
I can see it.
okay, great. So if you're looking here, you can see that as we've been talking about, even with a college higher education, the gap persists. And on a personal note, what that looks like is that the more education you have, the harder it is for you, because you're competing against so many or so much of white America that readily has access to those opportunities. So it's easy for them. I was talking with my mom last week about the differences in the disparities in higher education, and then she told me a story about a friend of hers who has a PhD, and she's having an extremely difficult time finding a job right now because the playing field is just, I mean, it's all white, and she's just one little pepper in the midst of a snowbank, so to speak. That's a bad analogy, but you know what I mean. Um, so we're being told that in order to close the wealth gap, you just need to go to college, you get those good jobs, and then you'll make that money, and that'll close it. But here, even within jobs that require the bachelor's and the master's and the doctorates, the income disparities gaps still continue. So there's that, and this is from ADOS, or AOC. I don't know how you pronounce that, but AXIOS. I'll add it to the chat. And then there is, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. So I'll go back, and I think it is this one. Let me share again. Okay. So here, I'll just read this. According to a new Pew Research Center analysis of data from the U.S. Census Bureau in 2014, the median adjusted income for households headed by Blacks was 43,300, and for whites, it was 71,300. Blacks also lagged behind whites in college completion, but even among adults with a bachelor's degree, Blacks earned significantly less in 2014 than whites. 82,300 for households headed by a college-educated Black person, compared with 106,600 for comparable white households. And I'll add both of those links to the chat if anyone wants to jump in on their thoughts. Go ahead, Layton. Unmute yourself, please.
I wanted to point out in the graphic that you were just showing, because that was essentially from the 10 minutes to closing the racial wealth gap. Essentially, if you look at the average wealth for a Black college graduate, I think it's like a 74,000 or something like that. And then if you compare that to the average wealth of a white high school dropout, it's actually less than that. And I think that was like the biggest takeaway from that in the 10 minutes to closing the racial wealth gap, is that as a Black college graduate, we have less wealth than white high school dropouts. And I think that's a direct reflection of essentially what wealth is. Wealth is intergenerational. So a white high school dropout has more wealth because their family has accrued more wealth over American history, as opposed to Black college graduates. Majority of our family didn't, accrue any wealth or didn't accrue any wealth over that same time period, which is why I feel we should measure middle class by wealth as opposed to income, because you can have a lot of wealthy people with very low incomes because they spending old money. Just in the same in our community, we have a lot of people, not even a lot of people, but we have a handful of people that have higher incomes but aren't able to accrue wealth because of things like, student loan debt or family debt or something. I like that a term that they created or that we created called the Black tax. Because generally, if you're the one to get the education and get the degrees and start doing well for yourself, it's your responsibility to, take care of the family. When your mama roof leaking, you got to fix it. When your auntie need her plumbing redone, you got to fix it. When your grandma needs surgery, you got to pay for it. And that's essentially what depletes our wealth, because the one, the highest person in our families, they have to take care of the whole family.
I also want to jump back in. You're right, Layton. The graphic within that article is from the Cook Center on Social Equality, and that report was completed by William Darity. So I just want to give credit where credit's due.
Yes, and he was the first person. Him, Antonio, Dark Hamilton, a group of those guys, they put together a white paper called "The 10 Missing Closing the Racial Wealth Gap," which is essentially that chart word for word. Generally, when I look that up, I have to download it from like a Duke website or something like that. But that chart has been out for a minute, and the first time I ever saw it was when Darity and Dark Hamilton and Tom put that list together. And I think as ADOS Kansas City, I think it's extremely important that we read that. So I'll try to get that downloaded and get that posted somewhere so we can have that information, on hand.
Well, speaking of reports, there's actually a report that the Urban League of Kansas City puts out every year, the state of Black Kansas City. And essentially, it has a localized version of much of the same data within it. I'll put a link to that here, and then we can go through some of those points in just a moment. As if anyone has read it and wants to jump in while I'm typing, just and give their thoughts on it so far, and then we'll get into that.
I'm interested to see what that looks like because I know, I'm not real familiar on Kansas City, like the Kansas City percentages and statistics. Like I'm really trying to up my knowledge on, what goes on here locally. But I'm willing to bet it's probably not too far off from the national, percentages. It seems like when I look across cities, it fluctuates from time to time, but for the most part, all of those, whether it's the wealth levels, the income levels, they're roughly about the same.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen again.
How often did you say that they do this annually?
Yes.
Okay. Do y'all know anybody on the Urban League here?
Yeah, Gwen Grant.
Have we spoken to her about what we got going on?
Not since we've been gathering like this, but through Councilwoman Melissa Robinson, she reached out to me before when she saw my engagements about ADOS stuff, and so we have a connection through her. I'm okay.
And quickly, and forgive me for being ignorant, but the National Urban. Oh, never mind. Okay, I was trying to specify because, with the Congressional Black Caucus, we had to get them to change their mission statement because it didn't specify African Americans, whatever. I was kind of wondering what the Urban League's definition of who they are. Is this specifically for Black people, or is this one of those, we do this for minority type situation?
I think in some instances it is their data is just related to Black Americans. However, I think they also have minority initiatives as well within the organization. But I'm not sure for sure because I've only concentrated on the information they have for Black Americans.
I dig it.
All right, so let me go back. And I'm assuming everyone can see the screen, yes?
Affirmative.
Awesome. So here we see that in Kansas City, the median household income for Black Americans is, I'm just going to round up, $38,000 a year. And white households have an income of $70,000 a year. The gap in net worth is the same if you look at point 2. Black Americans only have $17,600 compared to our white counterparts having over 170,000. And again, when we say when they say net worth, I think they were just including assets. They were not including the debt to asset ratio. So it actually would have been less than that.
Those are those depreciating assets.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's scary.
Yeah. And this is I put a link in the chat. There's so much good information here that we'd never be able to get through all of it in the hour and a half we have left. But if you can, please go to the Urban League of Kansas City's website, or type State of Black Kansas City, and then you'll be able to download the report.
Yeah, that's some really good information.
Let's stop share. So what do you, okay, I'm not muted. All right, so what do you think of that? We always talk about the data, and we are extremely fortunate that we have an organization that has already compiled the data specifically to Black Americans in Kansas City. So when you see that, and you live in here, and you live in the state of Missouri, and some of us are in St. Louis right now, how does that relate to you? How does that affect you? Because we talk about the numbers, but I think a lot of us, the majority of Black Americans, are still able to disconnect from the data because, like I said, they have the house, they have the cars, they're doing good on paper. You know what I mean? So how do we break down the data in a way that makes it make sense for the individual Black American? Go ahead, Leighton.
Okay, I've been talking a lot. I don't even want to cut nobody out. I'm sorry. I think so one of the reoccurring things and themes in a lot of this conversation that I have concerning this particular issue, I think we do ourselves a disservice when we compare our current position to where we've been. Like when we look at 2020 and say, I own a car, I own a home, I have a degree, et cetera, et cetera. And we compare that to figures of somebody in 1968 that couldn't own all those things. I think we have to place our current position in context to white America or mainstream America. It really doesn't have to be white America. Because I think what we come to notice is we, just like in the chart you just showed, so if you're only looking at the black line and you see we went from what is like 28,000 to 41,000, you say, hey, we've progressed as a collective $20,000. That's great. But what they don't show you is in relation to white people, you went backwards. Or in relation to mainstream America. It doesn't even have to be a black-white thing, although I think that is the measuring stick. So we have to place where we are in context to essentially who our competition is. Because all of the prices, gas prices, grocery prices, homeowner prices, those are all based off of the majority of Americans. And we sit at the very bottom of that list. So we have to compare our progress, and I've been having this conversation a lot. We have to measure progress in relation to where middle America is. Because if middle America's going up and we're not going up at the same ratio, we're essentially going backwards like we're doing currently. Oh, go ahead, Ms. Al. You muted.
I think that the difference is the systemic racism in institutions, the difference, because we've always known there's a difference in what we made in salary. What is it? The white man is, the white Caucasian man is 100%. What's, I think the black woman, makes 60, the black man 63, and woman makes another amount. We already knew that systemic racism, the difference in pay, and then the difference among gender. That's just systemic racism. And and that's the point of equality, to get the salaries the same based on merit.
Yeah, and to Miss Alvoni, I think it's 67% or 67 cents on the dollar for black men and 63 cents on the dollar for black women in terms of that ratio. And I think I believe white women make like 72 cents.
73.
Oh, okay. And so
73, yeah.
and so a point is funny you brought this up because Tone, I was watching a video Tone did last night, but we also have to keep an understanding white women marry white men, I think in like 70, 80%. So when we look at that, white people have $1.73, as opposed to if you look at black people, because majority of black men marry black women. So now you're comparing $1.73 to $1.30 or $1.20. That's crazy.
Yes.
So we can't, because I'm noticing there's a lot of black men versus brothers versus sisters type situation going on. And something Tom was speaking to, because the difference in pay for black men and black women is negligible, because men are at 67%, women and black women are at 63. So that's only a 4-cent difference. When you look at the differences between all other races of men,
Yes.
they're a lot lower.
Yeah.
So our issue is a familial issue as opposed to black men having it and sisters not.
But then you have to realize with the, as far as that difference, that tension between black men and black women, that's just the lynch letters being played out in 2020. That's all that is, you know what I mean? That's that kindling, but we're bigger than that as a people. We can see the distractions. So that, yeah.
And I also want to point out to that something related to intersectionality is that we, as a collective of Black men and Black women, don't have that buffer, you know, because white women can talk all day long about the issues they have within their own communities. However, at the end of the day, they're still connected to the white wealth of their fathers and uncles and husbands. That is their protection. Black American women specifically, since we've had this whole gender war going on, we don't have the buffer. We don't have that buffer with our Black men. So you can speak all day long until you're blue in the face about the disparities among Black men and Black women, Black American men and Black American women, but we're still in the same boat.
Very much, very much.
So just want to put that out there in case anyone here is wondering, well, it's not the same for there's differences between Black men and Black. I mean, it's whatever the word is.
Negligible.
Yeah, negligible. Sorry.
And something, and this may be a little controversial, and I really, as always, I would love for the sisters to push back on this, but Tom did a comparison yesterday when he was talking about he doesn't feel that it's known the condition of Black men. So what he did was, well, I think that was like you say, so there's 42 million Black people. So that's like 22 million, I think it's 22 million sisters and 20 million brothers, because there's more women than men. And of that 20 million Black men, we were doing a breakdown of comparison in age group. So I think he took away about 10 or 12 million or so from kids that are under 18 and elderly Black men. So that left us with 10 million Black men that are working age. And out of that 10 million Black men that are working age, I think a third of them, or it was either 25% or 33% of all these Black men are incarcerated. So if you factor that in, because think about it, a lot of these men that are incarcerated, like Kamala Harris, are using these Black men as firefighters in these types of jobs where they're only making 5-10 cents on the dollar. Those wealth values or those income values are not equated to the 63% and the 67%. Neither are the percentages of Black men that are in jail. Generally, people don't use prison statistics into wealth statistics because the prison population is negligible. You generally have less than 1% of a given demographic that are incarcerated. But for Black men, it's about 10%. So I think the highest prison incarceration rate in modern history was in apartheid South Africa. And they do these incarceration rates by 10,000. So in South Africa, they were arresting, or they had 800 per 10,000, 800 per 100,000. I'm sorry, I messed it up. It's 100,000, not 10,000. 800 per 100,000 is the largest incarceration rate in the history of known men. Now compare that to black men that incarcerate about 10,000 per 100,000. It's something like, it's something ridiculous number. So actually, 10% of all black men are incarcerated. That would greatly affect that 67% on the dollar, difference to white men that they don't include, because they don't include prison statistics in our income statistics, and they should, because a large amount of black men are incarcerated in America.
Excuse me, absolutely. And even within that, I'm going to share my screen again so we can see the stats for Kansas City. Oh, wait. Hold on. I'll let Antoine in. Okay. Can I do it? Okay. Yes, I did. All right. Good morning, Antoine. So if you're just now joining us, we're in the middle of a discussion about disparities within Black wealth as far as what we should consider middle class, and if we should just base that on income or actual wealth accumulation within the Black American community.
Okay, I just like to, hey everybody, this is Antoine. Good morning, everybody. Hey, I just like to apologize to the group. Y'all been real busy. I'm sorry, I'm late.
That's cool.
Yeah, you're good. So let me share the screen. So if you look here, these are the stats for the average prison sentences. Here you see Black Americans serve an average of almost 8 years compared to whites who serve an average of almost 6 years. And I'm not sure if this is, yeah, okay, so this is for the whole state of Missouri. Black Americans are 5 times more likely to be serving a death sentence compared to whites. And then let me stop sharing for a moment. Where was I? Here, okay. And then I'll share again. Okay, so here, if you see this chart, I'll read the bottom paragraph. It says 21% of Black men raised at the very bottom were incarcerated, according to a snapshot of a single day during the 2010 census. The New York Times, Emily Badger, Claire Kane Miller, Adam Pierce, and Kevin Quealy write in their piece, Black men raised in the top 1% by millionaires were as likely to be incarcerated as white men raised in the households earning about $36,000. So again, this gives evidence to the truth that structural racism is baked in, no matter what a Black American's income level or income status may be. And I'll add both of those links to the chat as well. So I guess the next point is how, aside from crime rates and incarceration rates, how do those income disparities, how does the racial wealth gap affect Black America? Go ahead, Leighton.
Uh, I guess to bottle it all up in a quick 2 sentences, because we like Al says, because we face that systemic oppression in income, we have to compensate that with getting multiple jobs or taking chances that we wouldn't normally take, whether that's drug trade or doing illegal things, this or that of the nature. And also because our communities are over policed and we also suffer from a lack of wealth, we get caught up in a lot of things that doesn't trouble much of America, i.e. if you have a tail light out. Generally, most Americans are able to go fix their tail light. Well, we get constitutionally, systematically oppressed. We don't have that wealth. So now we get multiple jobs to try to supplement our income so that we can have enough that we need. What suffers then? Now you're spending that time away from your child. So now when your child's growing up, they out there trying to figure it out. And so with that comes mistakes. And we all know, even in two-parent households where, the income rates are normal, this still happens anyway. The difference is you can pay that ticket money or you can afford a good lawyer and then you don't get a 10-year sentence for stealing. You can get it paid off or get it reduced. And I think if you combine the over-policing of our communities, you combine that with the systematic oppression that we face that leads to lower income, lower wealth rates. Not only are we not able to pass that money down to our children, we don't even get the time necessary to spend with our children to raise them properly. And also coupling that over policing in our neighborhoods. I mean, we saw the statistics for Black male incarceration. So you can all but remove the Black male out of the home due to all of these things. And then in addition to the systematic oppression, the lower wealth, the incarceration, the over policing of our neighborhoods, we're left going down and down, which is another reason why I feel that the Black community doesn't have a political literacy, mainly due to the fact that we don't have time to read nothing like that. Because most of us are struggling just to survive, and we have in our mindset, and I think it's a condition, honestly, that we're all strivers, I think, at some point in our lives. Where we're like, okay, if I just do this and do this and do this, I can work my way out of the situation. And that doesn't come true. So once we try that for so long, our bodies get tired, we get weary. There have been studies that show microaggressions that we experience in the workplace leads to stress, which leads to high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and all these other pre-existing conditions. So we're just suffering from all these different places. And I think the culmination of it, or one of the more important parts, is that, with income, we lack the income to do the things we need. But I think in the bigger picture, we're oppressed from various places. And this is one of many things we need to fix, in order to fix our condition here in America.
Sorry about that. I'm trying to find an article that I read recently, and it's about a local restaurant in Kansas City that's possibly, I think it is closing soon. And the restaurant owner said something really interesting within the article that I don't think a lot of people picked up on. So give me a moment. If you want to continue the discussion, while I'm trying to find it. Hold on. Or if anyone else wants to jump in about what they perceive as effects of the Black wealth gap. Like, and this is not just overall, because again, we're talking about breaking down the data in a way that makes it relatable to the individual Black American. So if anyone wants to jump in along those lines, please feel free.
I want to say something, and can everybody hear me? Okay, good. Sorry, first of all, apologies if anybody called on me explicitly over the last like 20 minutes. The reason I'm not on video today is I've got a large honeydew list that I'm trying to knock out. And my attention's been, particularly in the last 10 minutes, pulled away a bit. So apologies if that happened. And the other thing I want to say generally about what's been mentioned so far is that it's this, as usual, it's a great conversation, very nuanced, very honest, very free flowing. So kudos to everybody so far. Welcome to Cordell. And to Kiara, to your point, and I hope I'm not stating something that's already been said, but I think another really important aspect of the Black wealth gap is with respect to, under our current system of Citizens United, as of money is speech and political spending is considered free speech. I don't think it can be understated how important that is. When you put it in a framework of saying like, well, how does any given community try to improve their situation politically? Well, as we all see, if you following politics on any level at this point, particularly if you pay attention to the Democratic Party and Obama in particular, it's just vote, get out there and vote, get out there and vote. But you realize that in a system where money equals speech, in a political system where money equals speech, if you're at a disadvantage intergenerationally, as has been said so many times, you're at a disadvantage politically. And I don't think that point, again, forgive me if that point's already been made, but I think it's such an important point. I mean, just aside from like the day-to-day lived experiences, the week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year, generation-to-generation experiences of Black America, there's also this, it's this trap of saying like, well, if you would just vote more, if you would just participate more, like vote your interests, like don't sit on the sidelines. Well, it's more than just voting. It's so impossible, it's so difficult, not impossible, but difficult to make your voice heard in the political world when speech, money is speech. If you have less wealth, if you have less disposable income, if you have less liquid to actually devote to the political process, then how can you effectively, change your political situation? So that's it for me. I'm gonna go dark again, but keep listening.
That's an excellent take, Brian. Well, the question, how does the racial wealth gap affect America? We already know how it affects them. My thing is, why is things like they are? Why does ADOS American families have 10% of the worth that other families do not? Well, white families. It's by design. Just the same reason why instead of looking for internal candidates for city manager, people who have relative situations to the ADOS in Kansas City, they look for someone out of town with no relative experience. That's because they're looking for someone to keep up a certain status quo. The racial wealth gap, it facilitates something. It facilitates diverting power to a certain group of people, and it restricts power from a certain group of people. These things are by design. And what it does is it keeps ADOS as a bottom caste by design. Every time you can look at the increases in the in white American wealth, they do correspond with jumps in Black Americans' wealth too. And it's always by the certain, and wherever it calculates from, even if you're a professor and you get out of school, and you'll still be making 10% of what your white counterpart makes. That's by design. They want to constrict power. They want to stymie the flow of power to a certain group, because they do not want that group to become powerful. And that's all I'm going to say on that.
Yeah, to jump on and piggyback off of Antoine and Brian, I think when it comes to politics, we do have to realize that we are limited in our influence. We can't fund the candidates that we want to run. We can't. So even though we say vote, because that's really the only means of political influence that we have. But I think that's a dangerous narrative to just say just go out and vote like we've been doing. We need to educate people on who's running and why and who they should vote for. And I think with that comes um, the need for ADOS, because we're all about down ballot. And what down ballot does, it requires people to be educated, not just on the bottom half of the ticket, but the top half of the ticket too. Because if you're not voting for the president, you need to know why. And ADOS requires that. So I think it's so great. And I'm gonna let Al jump in. Go ahead, Miss Al.
I just want to tell y'all, I appreciate you guys putting up with my ignorance. I have not read so much about politics until joining this group. Oh my God. I had a lot of reading to do to just catch up. I was one of those diehard Democrats, just go in straight Democrat. And I realized how my political ignorance, that's the part I played in this fiasco. And secondly, I just wanted to say, doing my research, first of all, I had never even heard of the Green Party. And that concept of down ballot, it was like, what? So I went back and had to literally, I had to figure out that District 1, we didn't even have a Green Party candidate in our district. Like, what? I had never heard of the Green Party. That's just how ignorant I was. And to tell you not only the benefit of this ADOS education, I am really, really just astounded at the truthfulness. I have never before, literally, I feel liberated with this education. I was one of those people, go to work, go to school, go to work, make your money, spend your money, you know what I mean? Just live life. And I bought into everything that the Democrats, said. And I hate to say, yeah, that sounds good. Oh, yeah. And right now, I'm very embarrassed at how I just gifted my vote without no research. You know what I mean? Are you guys familiar with the echo chamber on Facebook? How everybody thinks the same, everybody celebrates the same. I was one of those people. You know what I mean? Without this ADOS education, I probably would have, straight Democrat. You know what I mean? I thank God for you guys, for the enlightenment. I'm talking about you guys have the life-changing surgery, and I appreciate that. And thank you.
Yeah, I think It's so weird because I was just talking to one of my Twitter friends the other day about what ADOS has done as far as changing my mindset, because and this is kind of going off topic a little bit, so I'm gonna jump and then I'll jump back on. But I was talking to her about therapy of all things, and in that, it kind of dawned on me. We were specifically talking about marriage counseling, and I said to her, I was like, now that I have the lens of ADOS, I think, because I've been in therapy and I've had white therapists and I've also had Black counselors as well. And now I can really see the difference in their methods. I won't go into it, but there's a difference in how, or at least my personal experience was, there's a difference in how they treat you. And then I wondered how many other Black American couples failed at the hands of a biased white therapist, or even perhaps a therapist who was ill-equipped to counsel to the needs of a ADOS specific couple. So those are the disparities. I mean, it's, from the top to the bottom, the structure of how America has been designed to keep us at the bottom, it infiltrates every aspect of our lives, from education to jobs to where we live, to even how successful we are if we need help, if we need counsel in life, in relationships. And now, so we're gonna pivot back, and I did say that we were also going to talk about some of the local issues that have been going on in Kansas City, and this is the article I'm about to share is a good segue into getting to ADOS Life. So I'll share the screen. And here you should be able to see a KCOR article about the Riger. Let me know if you can see it. Someone shout out.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So here, the Riger is among the first high-profile Kansas City restaurants to close in the pandemic, but the chef is sad about something else. And a little backstory: if everyone remembers, when the city shut down, the Riger opened up a community kitchen, and it was a way for them to enable to themselves to keep at least part of their staff, and also feed people in the community that needed it. And then we'll just scroll down. So here, there was a quote from Howard Hanna. He's the chef, and that is here. It says, Howard Hanna knows that as the owner and chef at the Riger, he's had it better than his staff, many of whom work 2 or 3 jobs to pay their bills. That's why his next step will include not just food, but activism. And earlier we mentioned what it is to be ADOS. You do have to work 2 and 3 and sometimes even 4 jobs just to be able to pay your bills. So I think it particularly stuck out to me because here, even in Kansas City, we have a mindset to support local, buy local, eat local, especially during these trying times, because we do want to protect our culture of having a locally based entrepreneurship culture. But even within that culture, the disparities are still there. So while eating at the Riger, yes, we would have been supporting local, but Chef Hannah was not paying his employees a living wage. Now, I'm sure there are many factors as to why that is, but I'll just continue. Um, and most of the rest of the world, you can be a server or bartender, and that's a respected professional job. And you, of course, within that, being a server or bartender, have health insurance, and you, of course, have paid vacation and sick days. We got it all wrong here, and it's really unfair. I'll stop share.
Uh, yeah, two things here that mental health, the mental health diagnosis is as regarding the ADOS, that's another form of suppression also. So you were correct to, link it with the wage gap, because it does suppress ADOS just like the capitalism does. And another thing about these jobs, we're cast into these jobs. ADOS as a ethnic group is the least likely to choose their career. They're more likely to have their careers choose for them. And these are all relative to mental health diagnosis and the wage gap. All of those have us having choices forced upon us other than making them ourselves.
Go ahead, Miss. I'll jump in.
Well, I just wanted to comment on, wait staff and bartenders, you only make, if anything has changed, $2.01 an hour. Everything else is considered tips. That's all they're paid, $2.01 an hour. And they're supposed to make the rest of their money in tips. So can you imagine living off $2 an hour? I don't think that has changed since I waited tables about almost 40 years ago. So they don't make that much money.
I'm saying I think you're right. That's I think within restaurants, they do pay those wages because they assume that their employees will be making the difference in tips. So you're right. Um, and we might have to get more into this another day. But in Kansas City, the right now the living wage is 12.50 an hour. Um, but next year it's supposed to increase to, I think, a little under 14 an hour. So unless you're making, I mean, it's almost November, so we might as well say, unless you're making $14 an hour, you are not able to sustain a decent lifestyle in Kansas City. Go ahead, Leighton.
I don't know if this has been a discussion that's been had nationally, but I know it was a discussion that I used to hear Tavis Smiley and Cornell West speak a lot about, and they compared the minimum or the minimum salaries to livable wages. Because if you have a average, a minimum salary and it's not a livable wage, what's the point in the salary? Like if you can't sustain a life off of a given salary, what's really going on? Like we can have a minimum wage, but if that minimum wage isn't a livable wage, then I almost feel like it's almost constitutional. You know, anybody that works a 40-hour week in and out should be able to afford, you know, the most meager, you know, just a studio apartment and a car note and your utilities essentially. But that's not what we have here in America. And I think that should be addressed as well. Also with, you know, the minimum wage hasn't increased with inflation. So like you have some places that I know minimum wage was like $5.15 when I started working. And in some places, I think in my home state, I think the minimum wage is like $7.25. So we have to have a livable wage. And I think that's something we should keep in mind when we're discussing, you know, minimum wages across the nation.
I think in that, Antoine made a very good point. We need to also think about the jobs that are even available to us. My first job was a grocery store clerk. And I think earlier this week, someone shared an article about Amazon Fresh and how all of their cashier stands are automated. Well, that if I was a teenager today, that would have cut me out from being able to have that be my first job, you know. But these are where we work. You know, we are in the kitchens of the restaurants in the city, definitely. Like I can attest to that. If you go into any kitchen in KC, I'll say not any, but the majority of kitchens, it's us cooking that food, you know? So with that, I am going to share the screen again. I found the link, the page I was talking about. Here you should see the a page about Kansas City's living wage initiative. And basically this is city council is working with corporations within the city to get them to increase their minimum wage to a sustainable one. I'll scroll down. If you can see here, so this year the wage is $12.50. However, if anyone does the math on that, they will realize quite quickly that $12.50 an hour is nowhere near close to being a living wage. I mean, the average rent in the city, I think, is $900 a month. That will require a person to make at least 3 times that, $2,700 a month. Next year, the living wage will increase to $13.75, which is better, but still, depending on what area of town you live in, it's still not a livable wage. So with that, I just want to point out we're right now city officials are trying to figure out how to turn us around for the better from this pandemic. We're going into next year. You know, there's been a few job fairs, and but within those job fairs, yes, the opportunities are there, but if those corporations aren't paying their employees a living wage, it's not going to make that much of a difference. They'll just be barely scraping by. And that kind of ties into the culture of ADOS life in Kansas City, across the country as well. But we have the data here to show that within Kansas City, the living wage, it's not even the minimum wage. It's the living wage, and that's nowhere near enough.
Yeah, when we
So,
do get increases, I'm sorry, Kier, I'm
oh
really
no, you're
sorry.
good.
And when we do get increases, it's just enough to squeak by. Like what they don't mention is with this $15 an hour, $15 an hour, that it coincides with the rate of inflation. So this $15 isn't any $15. It's really $9. You know what I mean? That's the way we need to look at it now. Those of us, we're in the same age group. You know what I mean? $10 was something 20, 30 years ago. It's not now. $15 isn't anything. It was something $10. It was something 10 years ago. So, it's a form of pacification is what it is. Anytime they give us any type of increase that, people want us to symbolically, look at it, I guess, and think it's something, it's a form of pacification. So when we look at these legislations like the $15 an hour and even UBI, Medicare for all, jobs for all. Those of us that aren't ADOS specific with our thinking, we need to look at them in that lens. Like, okay, will this really uplift my people's relative to the situation that that's all it does. It lifts them up relative to the situation they are in now, but they're still at the bottom caste. Just like I was telling you, you look at that bar graph and you could put a whole bunch of other ethnicities on there too. But as you can see, we're always at that bottom. So America can do good. America can do excellent. It can excel, but we still won't excel at the same rate of others. And that's true regardless of any of the data. And now what I fear is that there's going to be an assault on free speech, and there's going to be an assault on education, because what we're demonstrating now is our propensity for knowledge and our propensity to take that knowledge and let it lead us to places where we need to go. So there's going to be a concerted effort to restrict knowledge, because this knowledge is what's making us powerful now, not the money.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna so Antoine, while you were talking, I was searching for an article that I saw where it says if wages had kept up with productivity, minimum wage today would be $24 an hour.
Exactly.
It says, while the national minimum wage did rise roughly in step with productivity growth from its inception in 1938 until 1968, in the more than 5 decades since then, it has not even kept pace with inflation. However, if the minimum wage did rise in step with productivity growth since 1968, it would be over $24 an hour today, as shown in the chart below. And there it is. So in 2020, minimum wage should be $24 an hour. And I
Just
will.
pointed it out, and that tells right there what I just said. It's by design, because if it was really, if it really raised with productivity, it would be that. So they kept it below productivity for a certain reason, because they know ADOS usually has minimum wage jobs. No way we can let ADOS catch up. So we have to handicap the minimum wage. All of our data keeps leading us back to the same place. I know everybody realize that every piece of data we crunch leads us back to the same place. why does it lead us back to the same place?
Because this country owes us a debt. That's why. I mean, it's clear as day. In this particular instance with the minimum wage, you're right. In even in that, we've already shown the evidence of how from the minimum wage jobs to the lower white collar, blue collar jobs, we're still, even in those, we're still not paid enough. No matter what level we're at, we're not paid enough. Black Americans are not paid enough. And that is a part of why reparations for ADOS is necessary to address those disparities within the system. Sorry, that went on kind of long. Does anyone else have any news that they've heard or seen this week that they want to talk about? Go ahead, Layton.
So I of course, y'all know I get in a lot of interesting conversations about politics and how do we go forward. And I know given with the current election, one of the main conversations I've been having pretty repetitively has been about what I've been trying to discuss is the difference in Black America under a Trump administration as opposed to a Biden administration. Because basically what I've been noticing, I mean, don't get me wrong. Most of the time I have this conversation, they call me a Trump supporter because most people feel like you can't criticize or you can't push Dems without being a Trump supporter. So one of the things that I've been noticing, and I think was a great point, and I pulled this article, I think, from one of the events on the event show, I think on Wednesday. It was two articles that came out. One was with the Washington Post, and I forget who the other article was, but I think it was the Guardian, maybe. And it basically showed, it compared home ownership, incarceration, and unemployment of 2020, I think it was 2019, to those rates in 1968, which would have been right after the civil rights legislation was passed. And what it showed is that Black incarceration has tripled since then. Unemployment, although it is lower than usual, is still double that of whites. And it also showed that what it was, incarceration, home ownership, and I forget the last term. But essentially what it shows was we're essentially in the same position we were in 1968. And that's not even in comparison to the gap that has been increased by white America. And that's a conversation that I constantly have with a lot of people who's just, vote Dem, vote Dem, vote Dem, vote Dem. But we've been voting Dem 60 years. And that has led us to here, which has tripled our incarceration, which hasn't increased our unemployment rate, which hasn't increased our home ownership rate. And this article also went into detail, and I'll drop the article in the chat. This article also went into detail about how home ownership rates have leased, and the people, Black Americans, African Americans that own homes are at a significant percentage higher to go back to renting as opposed to other counterparts, which also shows and proves that as a whole, Black America is downwardly mobile. And the turning point that I like to have in the conversations, or that I try to make, is if we've been voting Democratic at higher than 85% since 1968, and that has led us to triple incarceration, lower home ownership rates, higher unemployment rates, we're not doing, whatever we do from this point forward needs to be drastically opposite of what we've been doing. And I'm not saying vote for Democrats. We never say that here. But what we are saying is, to me, what that says, it shows that we don't have a political literacy. And whatever we're doing, we're not doing it correctly because it's not affecting our communities. And I also believe that the issue in that I see, which I think is the most important issue when it comes to the policies and the legislations that we vote on that are democratic, we have to specify ADOS as a given community, because with that specificity comes the resources to our communities. And without that, this isn't going to change. There's no in between. It doesn't matter if we control the House and the Senate. None of that makes a difference. And I myself have been looking at the Left Every Voice and Sing plan and just kind of going through to see specifically what's asked for. And I know for me, it's just not specific. Like once you go to the bullet points and there, it says, well, we're going to address systematic racism. We're going to address incarceration. I don't need an address. I need a policy and I need a budget. If you can't give me a policy, you can't give me a budget, you can't give me a specific ADOS legislation that specifies us specifically, you keep all that shit, as far as I'm concerned, because it's not going to work. And how I know it's not going to work is by looking at those statistics from 1968 to the present, because all of those policies have been written similarly. And now with our immigrant population being as large as it is and contributing to the American economy as significantly as it does, we have to get that specified legislation. And so those articles, and I'll post them here in the chat in a minute, they really went into detail, because I hear a lot now. It's like, we got to get Trump out. We got to get Trump out. Okay, we get him out, then what? Because Biden isn't, our condition isn't changing. And that's kind of where I've gotten to at this point, where I think America would be a great, better place, most definitely. But I personally, I'm not sacrificing my vote for America no more. I've sacrificed 400 years of shit so that we can get to where we got to go. And I ain't doing it no more. And there's also been a parallel conversation when we talk about like the Trump condition, right? So, you know, white people voted at a majority for Donald Trump. White men voted at a majority, white women voted at a majority. And something that I have to pound into our constituency and our community, you can't blame Black America that didn't vote more than you blame white people that did. That's more, you have to go at the white people that voted for Trump, because that's who put him in office. And I personally don't believe in it. If you guys have pushback, I would love to hear it. I personally believe that not voting for the Democrat doesn't put Trump in office. Because if nobody votes for Trump, he doesn't go in office. We have to hold specifically white women accountable, because as opposed to voting for Hillary Clinton in the last election, they voted for Donald Trump. That's who put Trump in office. They went against white women to vote for Donald Trump. If that's not target number one, you can't target Black men, you can't target Black women, you can't target Black America. We didn't vote Republican. Matter of fact, we voted Democrat at like 80–90%. So what more can you ask for us? And in addition to voting Democratic 90%, she didn't have any fucking policy for our communities. So not only did we not vote self-interested, we voted for the betterment of the Democratic Party, for the betterment of America, despite us suffering and not having any policy that was going to affect our communities. So that's been a big thing that I've been pushing here. Like I said, I would love to hear you guys' response on that, because as a Black male, I think it's bullshit. You're not going to come in my face and tell me I'm supposed to vote somebody who ain't going to do shit for me. And the reason the country is like it is because of us. We've been on the bottom for 400 years. How is everything, it's our fault that the country is as it is, yet we on the bottom and don't control shit. That's a bullshit ass argument. Excuse my French, I'm gonna clean that up. I don't think that's a very constructive argument. I don't believe that that's a very, I mean, it's not statistic based. And I just don't believe in throwing stuff out there without the data to support the ideology.
So I agree with all that. And I'm going to share my screen again because I want everyone to see this. Hold on just a minute. I'll let Antoine back in. Because I want everyone to see this tweet. Okay. So on Twitter, Rich Jamal put this post out. I guess he was in the middle of a debate about someone who said that the Black Caucus supported the 1994 crime bill. Let me go back. Okay. Doo-doo-doo. So he says, and it's a really interesting article. So if you can find Rich Jamal and read it, it says 13 out of the 38 members of the CBC, Congressional Black Caucus, at the time originally voted against the bill. Bill Clinton convinced three of them to change their votes. 48 other Democrats voted against it as well and almost died. So I actually read that article, and in that article, sorry, and here on my personal page, Kiara D. Watts, I found this little snippet very interesting. It says, he was selling his presidency, Bill Clinton, that is, the party, and the fact that we will not get a better bill than this, said Rep. Charles B. Rangel, a New York Democrat who found Mr. Clinton persuasive. Every step forward in a positive way renews the confidence the people have in the president. The Black lawmakers got almost nothing in return and will probably have to give up a lot along the way to pick up the moderate Republicans whose help is also needed to make up the 8 votes by which the bill fell short last week. So, again, just so we're clear, in exchange for their support of the bill, the people that we voted into the Black Caucus got nothing. And we all know the devastation that 94 crime bill had on our community. But here's the kicker. In fact, some Republicans raised the ante yesterday for their support of the 94 crime bill. Newt Gingrich of Georgia, the House GOP whip, said the price for picking up Republican votes could be as high as $6 billion in cuts from crime prevention programs, many of which help Black communities. A smaller faction of moderate Republicans might want at least $1 billion in cuts from those programs. White House Chief of Staff Leon E. Panetta said yesterday that the president would agree to cut $420 million. So, in order for the 94 crime bill to pass, Republicans got $420 million cut from programs that benefit Black American communities. And it's just that right there, because it's just a ridiculous but further evidence of how our voting thus far has gotten us literally nothing. Worse than nothing. It's got funding cut away from our communities. So I think now more than ever, we need to be diligent on why we're voting, and who we're voting into office, and who we're selecting as our representatives. Because the Black Caucus ain't it. So
The Black Caucus is not it. And I think you bring up a good point too, because talking about this, but I want to share something. A lot of the people that I interact with, they don't see it the same way. It's almost as if they're programmed to just think, this is how I've always thought, this is how I've always done, this is how my parents did it. So for them, they just think Democrat, lesser of the two evils. We hear that all the time too. But what you just said just impacted me, so I had to unmute and say something, because I'm like, it is so true that like we just keep doing it over and over and over, and we've got nothing. We've got nothing.
Does anyone else want to jump in, add to that, or share any other ADOS local news that they've read this week or seen this week?
I did see an article a couple of days ago that was talking about Kamala Harris. Or it might have been this morning that I read that. It was talking about Kamala Harris went to Atlanta and she met with a lot of brothers. So I want you guys to pay attention to this. I think there's going to be a lot of rhetoric around capturing the black male vote from both the Republicans and the Democrats. And so Kamala went out to Atlanta and she sat with some brothers and had some discussions. And I just, I didn't read through the article meticulously, but I just kind of scanned a little bit. There was a section in there where she was talking about, not we have to vote for the ancestors, but she mentions our ancestors within that. And I'll be totally honest, I think that's a slap in the face. Like, first of all, we don't have the same ancestors, first and foremost. And secondly, I don't care about none of that shit. If you want my vote, pull up with this policy, specific policy. And if you're not pulling up with specific policy, you can stay where you at. And also, I saw this and I'm looking for it now, but there was some legislation that I feel like was introduced that was kind of speaking of like the black diaspora when it talks about like the black community. And in the word, and I gotta have to find the article, I'm looking for it now. But in the word, it basically says it doesn't matter where you come from, the black condition is this in America. And I think that's totally opposite to what we're doing. Like, and for me, and again, y'all know I can get a little over there sometimes, but I just view like the black immigrant population, like I can never view them as a one-to-one to ADOS America because you chose to come here. Like this was your option and you're over here dealing with what we deal with. If you don't like how you're treated, if you don't like the systematic oppression, if you don't like the fight that we have, take your ass home. Like we didn't ask you to come over here. Like you over here because this is the place for upward mobility. But I think it is extremely disrespectful that black immigrants don't support the ADOS cause because we created the here to come to. And I think this is something we have to fight very vigilantly because I honestly feel like they're trying to erase all of our lineage. They're trying to erase our struggle. They're trying to erase all of the progress that we've made up until this point.
All right, Layton. Well, if you do find that article, please link to it in the chat. But I want to jump in and say, I don't think it's. Here's the thing. When it comes to how immigration has affected the Black American community, we have to put the focus where it needs to be, and that is on the US government. Immigrants come to this country because they've been enabled to come to this country. And also within that, I think when it comes to certain immigrant communities, those who are seeking asylum, I honestly do think that America should definitely be such a country where people can who need to escape oppression in their own communities can come here and have a better life. However, I first and foremost think that America needs to address the fact that it has not been a place of refuge for its own citizens. There's been, especially within Black America, there has been far too much usurping responsibility to us. There has been no investment in our education to ensure that we are able to get the jobs that immigrants are coming into the country and getting now. There's been no investment in making sure that our communities are built up, as opposed to the Koreatowns and the Little Havanas and Little Italies. Our historic Black neighborhoods are on the brink of extinction. Extinction. So and I really hate to say this, because but especially in Kansas City, when you think of 18th and Vine and the businesses that are there, you know, I mean, I think how many restaurants are down there?
What are we talking about?
18th and Vine. You know, I'm not gonna, okay, I won't get into the details of it, but I will say, compared to other developments within the city, you can definitely tell that that I mean, you see the disparities. Like, you can see the difference in investment in Black American communities versus other communities. Like, so go ahead, Layton.
So here I go being radical again, right? To me, I personally feel. I mean, you know, it's to be swayed. I can't say I'm standing on this with everything I got, but I don't feel like you could do both. Like, you can't offer America as a place for refuge for people that have been oppressed and terrorized if you're oppressing and terrorizing people. Like, you can't do both. Like, if and I think Somalia is
I agree with you.
I think Somalia is a great example. So, I think Minneapolis, go figure. Minneapolis, Minnesota is a sanctuary city for Somalians. Somalians go to Minneapolis, Minnesota for sanctuary. We get murdered by police in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I don't think you can do both, because I feel like how can you create a refuge space? And this is something that we've been speaking about religiously over the past couple of years. As an American citizen, I should be afforded certain amount of rights just off the fact that I'm an American citizen. We have a situation now where we have people that don't even have American citizenship that have more access to wealth, more access to capital, more access to freedoms and rights that we don't even have. I don't believe you can do both. And I do feel like if we're able to understand that information, it makes a great case for our being in reparations, because here it is, we've been here for 400 years. There's legislation that has been through the Senate, been through the state, and has passed to where there are funds and resources that are available for immigrant populations that aren't even American citizens. So here it is, you could be a Somalian and have more access to America, and you're not even a citizen. I've been here 400 years and built America, and I don't have access. So I think that's a good line, because what I hear a lot from these Democratic heads is, well, we're not a large majority of a population to pass those specific legislation that's going to help our community. Well, hell, we like 40 times the size of the Somalian population, and they have what we're trying to get, or a portion of, or something similar. So I don't believe we can be a refuge. I don't believe we can be a sanctuary city. I don't believe people can come here for refuge. Not to mention, we're probably more of the reason why their countries are fucked up in the first place. So how do we go to your country and bomb it with drone strikes and then say, hey, I know I blew up your neighborhood, but you can come here and be all right? I don't see both. Like, to me, it's one or the other in that respect. Either you do right by Black people, we get our citizenship rights, we get, the reparative justice that we're owed, or America's full of shit. Period. I feel like we have to force them to live up to the ideals that are written on paper.
Absolutely. And I'm saying, Layton, I agree with you that we can't do one before the other. In that sense.
We can't do one before the other.
We cannot. We America, like you said, should not be a sanctuary for immigrants until it is a sanctuary for its foundational citizens, for Black Americans. And in the chat, I'm adding a post that Tone Talks did on George Floyd and the store. I'm gonna share the screen here. Okay, so we're talking about sanctuary, right? Well, Tone Talk, Antonio Moore, he did a post on October 7th, and he posted about a Slate article about the store that called the cops on George Floyd and how it's facing a painful reckoning. And if you can, please, you can search Tone Talks in George Floyd to find it. But if you do have time, read that article, because within it lies a great detailing of how Black Americans are left behind, how we're being, I wouldn't even say we're being replaced by an immigrant class. I'm saying we're being forced further down on the bottom by an immigrant class. You know, because as we know, the US government has enabled immigrants to come into our Black communities, open up businesses that don't hire us. So we can't even work where we live. Go ahead, Ms. A.
I just want to add a comment. We saw that in the 90s where the local businesses, the meat markets and the gas stations were actually owned by Black people. And somewhere in the 90s, that immigrant population came along and again, we're forced to the bottom. I agree with everything that you're saying, but I literally got witnessed this firsthand. You go into a business, next time you go back, it's owned by immigrants. And I guess we've all had your share of experiences with immigrants, but I would, as I would always tell my kids, I would always go into the store and calculate what the bill was, and I could calculate the taxes. And I would always tell my kids, when you go to these stores, make sure you know what it is, the amount you owe, because they add $1 or a 50-cent surcharge. That was just something that I personally noticed going into these businesses, that they would add an additional 50 cents or $1 onto a bill unless you ask for an itemized receipt. You know what I mean? Then you'll tell them, well, you overcharged me. That was just one of my experiences. I just wanted to put that out there. We are forced to accept people in our communities, whether we like it or not. And I was just emphasizing that point.
All right, so we are at the end of our discussion for today. It's 11:20, so we're going to start wrapping up. If anyone else has anything that they wanted to add, any interesting articles they've read this week, we'll touch on those real quick, and then we are going to head on out. So I'll give, if anyone else has anything they want to add, please go ahead and chime in.
Hey everybody, this is Antoine again. Yeah, I wanted to piggyback off of what was just said, those hidden surcharges when it comes to ADOS. There's been articles written about how we've been exploited by not just, that's just the service industry, a little dollar you know, because they think we won't pay a tip. But we also get overcharged for health insurance, for life insurance, loans. So it's definitely in the financial sector too. And those so-called and those surcharges and that, you know, that those extra charges that they put on top of us in the financial sector, it facilitates the same thing as the racial wealth gap and miseducation by casting Blacks to the bottom. So once again, the strategy goes to the same end in every industry. I'd like to expand on that. You know, if we get all these data from the different industries and it keeps on leading us to the same conclusion, and we keep on saying this word caste. Well, caste is a system. Caste is a system designed to work the way it does. So why are we on, we go through the data. We see all the data leads us to the same places. So why are we?
Young kids sound like they're having a good time.
Yeah, exactly. They hear me talking. Children, yeah, they hear me talking. That's what they do, man. That's what they do. They hear you talk about something important, and then they want to, you know, come running in and stuff. They're like, hold on, now the center of attention ain't gonna be on you. I'm gonna direct it back to me. But I just keep repeating myself again, so somebody else can expound.
Well, I just want to take, I don't mean to cut you off, Antoine, or whatever, but I want to thank everyone, Kiera, Leighton, I want to thank y'all for setting this up and putting ADOS Kansas City together. Thank you so much for that. And I really appreciate it. I'm excited. I'm excited to be a part of this. And if there's anything you ever need me to do, or anywhere you need me to be, I will always try to make my schedule available. But I'm looking forward to hearing. And Miss Al, I thought she had some great points today too. It's great to hear from people that are in my area that think similar to the way that I do. And it's also nice to get some different perspectives too on ADOS and the movement and things like that. So if there's ever anything any y'all need for me to help grow this, I do have a sports podcast that's here in Kansas City. I'm not plugging it. I'm just saying I do have an outlet. We have about 500 spins a week. But I want to be a part of this, and I want to help as much as I can.
Yep. Well, on that note, I am going to say yes. We are gearing up for defining and refining our organization within ADOS Kansas City. And as you know, we're missing Deb today, but she and Miss Al are in St. Louis, so we are across the state of Missouri in the two largest cities. And if you are interested in joining in, please visit us on Twitter or Facebook. Our pin post has a list of ways that you can connect with us. And again, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate y'all. Leighton, Cordell, Miss Al, Antoine, Brian, Miss Deb, who's not here today. We miss her. And thank you so much for joining us. If you are watching, thank you so much. Please like this video. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And also, please share this video with your family and friends, because this information is very much needed within our local communities. So we are out for the day. Please enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will see you next Saturday. Bye-bye.
Later, fam.
Later, everybody.